Today we're going to be taking a look at the BenQ HT4550i, also known as a W4000i. I released another video where I showed my first impressions of this particular projector in different lighting situations, so make sure to check that out if you're interested in seeing that. So this is a 4K pixel shifting projector using the Texas Instruments 0.65 DMD chip. I would say this is a short throw projector, not to be confused with an ultra short throw, which is meant to be placed below the screen. All that means is that you can have a projected image of over 100 inches with about 10 feet distance from the screen itself. This is a 3200 lumen projector covering 100% of DCI-P3 color space. So this is also using a 4 LED light engine as opposed to the bulb on the previous models. And they claim that with normal usage, you can get up to 10 plus years of use out of this. So jumping right into it, the first thing I would say is just the colors out of this are very accurate. And that's what I would expect from BenQ. They've always made very accurate projectors. This one even comes with a factory calibration report, and that is pretty amazing. I could tell right out of the box that it was accurate because I also do lots of color calibration. I make these videos and I know what my skin looks like, I know what the color shirt this is, and so when I compare it to what I see on the screen, it is very accurate. The monitor that I use is color calibrated, and I can say that it is very close to what I see on the BenQ. It's amazing that it's nearly indistinguishable, aside from the fact that this is a 32-inch screen and the other one is 120. Now, the thing that I noticed is that the black levels on this are better than what I had before, but still not quite what I was hoping for or wishing for. I mean, maybe my expectations were unrealistic, but yeah, they're still not perfect black, and that's what you get at this price point. I'm hoping that one day they're gonna crack the code and be able to provide perfect black levels at these prices. I should also mention that the starting price at this current time is $2,999. Now, what it lacks in perfect black levels, it does make up for in brightness. This is a bright projector. I know it says 3000 lumens, and it just looks very bright. I don't know if it has to do with the light engine type, but when I compare this to my TK850 that I usually use that also has about 3000 lumens, it's not even close. So I don't know if my bulb is going out on that one, but I don't remember the TK850 ever looking this bright. If you don't have it in a perfectly light controlled situation, even though I do watch in my theater, sometimes I have the lights on, I still want to be able to watch something. This does have a dynamic contrast mode, which can be set to off, low, medium, or high. And I can see why it would look better on some situations, but it is less accurate. So it depends on the type of content that you're watching and what you prefer. I usually keep it off, but it does help to enhance the contrast when it's on. Now, the weak point in most projectors that I've seen is HDR, just because they don't get really bright enough to be able to provide that pop that you'd expect from HDR. And on many projectors, I prefer to watch SDR content to HDR. But on these BenQs, the HDR tone mapping is excellent. And they also give you options to choose whether you want the lighter or darker aspects of the HDR scene. So depending on the movie, if you're watching a dark movie, you may want to brighten it up to be able to see more detail. And if you're watching a bright movie, you may want to turn that down to preserve some of the darker scenes. So I've used projectors before where I had to use a specific Blu-ray player to provide the tone mapping. And in my opinion, the BenQ provides better tone mapping than that system ever did. This also has a dedicated 24p mode, which reduces some of the judder if you're watching a movie that is in 24p. And what I notice is when I switch to that and watch some 24p content, everything just looked much smoother, almost like it wasn't 24p. It was kind of a weird sensation, but I liked it. It still had that 24p cinematic motion blur that you expect, but when something was there, it didn't look stuttery like that. It looked nice and smooth. As far as sharpness, I know this is a pixel shifting projector, but BenQ, I don't know what they're doing, if they're using good lenses, but I have no problem with the sharpness. I've used these as an extension of my computer system where I use them as a monitor, and that really can bring out the flaws because if you're looking at text, if it's not sharp, it's pretty easy to tell. And these do a great job with that. Connecting my computer to the projector also shows latency issues, and with this one, I noticed that it was very low latency compared to my old projector. They have a fast mode that turns off some of the features, and they claim that the latency is 17.9 milliseconds at 4K 60 compared to 86.5 milliseconds on my TK850 that is a huge improvement. They even have a mode where you can change it to 1080p, 240 Hertz, and that reduces the latency down to 8.7 milliseconds. Speaking of speed, one welcome change is that it is much faster to turn on and turn off compared to my previous projector. It has to do with them not having to warm up and cool down the bulb, and there was a significant difference that I showed in my first impressions video. Also, the noise is significantly reduced on this compared to the TK850, and if you put it on eco mode, it's almost silent. Now, I use Smart Eco, which is a little bit louder, but not to the point where it's distracting by any means. And of course, if I'm playing a movie and there's sound coming out, I totally forget the projector's even on. All right, so this is my regular talking voice, and the mic is right about here, about arm's length distance. All right, so first the TK850, go ahead and power it up. So let's go ahead and try the HT4550. They do have a streaming stick that's included that runs on Android TV. They actually have a cool way to install it, which hides the streaming stick in the back. I think that they should have had that pre-installed, but it's cool that they provide it. If you're gonna buy a projector at this price point, I really recommend getting a better streaming device like an NVIDIA Shield or Apple TV 4K. It's just a better experience. They're faster and more capable than these are. Now, from an installation standpoint, this has more lens shift than the previous TK850, and I found that very useful because it does have different mounting points on the top. So I just mounted this using the existing mount. I didn't have to move anything up there, and I was able to use the lens shift to just move it left and right and up and down, and I was able to get it framed perfectly. Very easy and very useful. Of course, you're gonna need to use the zoom and focus to get that centered perfectly, but it was very easy. This has a ton of ports in the back. You can take a look here. And if you're gonna use this in a professional situation, they do have options for that, such as trigger switches and serial ports. Now, this does support HDR10, which is welcome, and it also offers 3D support if you're into that sort of thing. I don't watch too many movies in 3D, but I may try it out once in a while. When it comes to some of the more technical stuff, I refer to my friend Phil Jones at projectorreviews.com. Let me get him on here and he can talk to you more about some of those technical details. So here we have Phil. Phil, there's a lot of things I can't do when it comes to projector reviews, and I know that you run projectorreviews.com, and so I'm kind of curious about what you found regarding measurements. You know, I'm a measurement guy. What did you find?
Big thing that matters on these type of projectors is color accuracy. And a lot of times when you look at projectors, especially projectors that are under like the $5,000 price range, they aren't very accurate. And a lot of times they don't meet their brightness specifications. The thing that, so of course we always test it. We're nice enough to I have a Klein measuring device and all the little tricks you need for Cowman to measure it. So the first thing we did was we measured its color gamut. So they say it can do 100% DCI-P3. It can, because it has a cinema filter. So this little thing, when you switch between modes, you can actually hear it click in and click out. What that does is that expands the color gamut to 100% DCI-P3, and DCI-P3 is the color that's used in most HDR content. But when you do that, it's almost like putting sunglasses on something. So you're going to lose about 25 to 30% of your brightness. Me personally, I thought the colors were vibrant enough when watching HDR not to use it. And if you're watching SDR material, there is enough color range in that to even turn it on. So I have this. So if I was looking at HDR, I would probably say yes. It'd be on paper. It looks cool to hit 100%, but I think 80% with 30% more brightness is going to give you a better HDR picture. But you have the choice. I'm not here to tell you what's right. You have the choice to do that. The next thing is how accurate it is. You know, you hear all the deltas and all that stuff. We always measure for delta error. Delta error is if this is the red it's supposed to be, and this is the red that you're getting. If it's too far off, you will be able to differentiate what the creator intended for you to see from what the projector is producing. And the standard is if the delta error is less than 3, it's pretty much impossible, except for the most hardcore colorists, to see a difference. BenQ says that their projectors come pre-calibrated. So of course you want to test it. And we were quite surprised. In its better picture modes, it was a delta of around 2 or less, which is pretty much outstanding when it comes to, normally we test, that's RGB, grayscale, the balance between red, green, and blue. So a lot of times I can take a DLP projector and it would take me a half an hour to an hour to get it to be what this projector was out of the box. So that was actually surprising.
So that's a great value, because somebody who's buying this particular projector, they might not have it in their budget to go and have somebody professionally calibrate it. So that's a big value added, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're buying a big Sony or a big JVC, the picture is already great, but you already spent 20 grand on a thing. Why wouldn't you spend another 500 to $1,000 to dial it in? But many of us are working our way up, and the BenQ has, when you talk about black level color accuracy, good HDR out of the box, is very good. Can you make it better? Absolutely. It took me, I mean, it was great out of the box. It took another half an hour. It was even better. The one thing that I noticed that it could be better is there's 2 things we check. RGB balance, that's the grayscale. They call that grayscale. So it's from black to white. So it's different steps. Like you see that grayscale pattern? You want that to be gray, 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 all the way up to white. Then the next one is color tracking. You know, there's dots. There's a certain intensity of red, blue, green, magenta, cyan, yellow, and you want it to hit the spots exact. This one, it's a little oversaturated. So the reds are redder than what they should be, and the blues are bluer than what they should be. And they're a little shifted, not enough for you to notice, but a little bit. For most people, it's okay. If an overly intense red just looks cool to most people. But if you're a geek, you can quickly dial that down. And
but it's not like the skin tones are just going to be like all over the place and totally unrealistic. That part is
no.
okay.
It's more like your red of your baseball cap is going to be a little more intense than what it should be.
Okay.
But I will tell you that the stuff like in your range, like skin tones and stuff, it's pretty good.
Okay. And so that's what I found also. And I remember I called you when I first got it. I'm like, how come these LEDs, it says that it's, 3,000 lumens or, whatever it is, but it seems so much brighter than my bulb based ones. I almost thought, are these going out? Why does it seem so much brighter, even though the number may not say that it's super bright? Is there anything to the light source? What is that about?
Yeah, it has to do with the light source. This has been a debate. So the way that we normally test a projector for brightness is ANSI lumens. What that is they test certain positions on the screen and they take an average. So that way there's like a pattern, and you're supposed to check all the different patterns and you average it. Most reviewers just don't do it exactly like that. We just want to get an estimate about if it's on target. So we'll take some different measurements in different areas and come up with that average. And if they say 3,200 and we get 3,250 or 3,150, we know the average, the manufacturer is pretty much telling the truth. If we get 2,000, that's a problem, right? Well, the difference with an LED projector is the way your eyes respond to it is a little different than what the measurement will be. And so a lot of manufacturers try to rate it as LED lumens. So you'll hear some manufacturers say, well, this is 4,000 LED lumens, 3,000 ANSI lumens, right? So, but BenQ just said it's a 3,200 ANSI lumen, but because it's using an LED light source, you perceive it as brighter. If you ever have a camera like this and you have LED lights behind you, the camera really loves them and the colors are really intense. More intense than you see, right? That's because how the camera's sensor responds to LED light, where your eyes do the same thing.
Well, thanks a lot, Phil. That was a ton of info. And for you guys who want more, make sure to check out Phil's site, projectorreviews.com, and you can look at all the stuff there, right, Phil?
Exactly. The review is still in production, but it'll be up in probably by the middle of, what is this, June? a week or so from now.
So there are definitely a lot of things that are just better suited for a website. like looking at the different charts that you were talking about. And so make sure to check out his site. Phil, thank you again.
Dude, no problem, anytime.
So in conclusion, I am really enjoying this projector. They did send this out free for me to review, so I have to say that. But what I can say is I also have a bunch of BenQ projectors that I've purchased or have reviewed in the past. The first one I've ever purchased was the HT2050, and I still have it, and I'm still amazed by how bright and accurate that is, but it's a 1080p projector, so a little bit older. I also have the HT4550, which this one is a direct replacement for, I think. I know that they still have the HT4550i, which is a newer version, bulb-based. My issue with the HT3550 is that it didn't seem to be bright enough. There wasn't enough pop. So I ended up using the TK850 in my theater, even though the color accuracy wasn't as good, but it just was brighter, so it was worth the trade-off for me. This projector is brighter and more accurate than the TK850, so it's really the best of both worlds. In my living room space, which is not light controlled, I have the V7050i ultra short throw, and that thing is amazing. That's using a laser light source, and yeah, I would say as far as brightness, oh man, they're very close. But of course they're very different. That one's an ultra short throw and this is a ceiling mounted projector. Between the two though, I would say that the image quality is comparable, brightness is comparable, but I would say that this one is more accurate. Don't get me wrong, the V7050 is no slouch. It's just hard to compare the two directly because one is in a light controlled situation with a specific type of screen and the other one is in a living room with tons of light coming in. So different purposes. So I've recently reviewed the GP500, which also uses the 4 LED light source, and it's a little bit different, and that one's meant to be portable. But the main thing I noticed is that one wasn't as bright with 1500 lumens, and the color accuracy wasn't as accurate, but still some of the same qualities as far as brighter than you would expect. 1500 lumens on that one doesn't seem like 1500 lumens, seem brighter than that. But the most obvious difference that I see is that the black levels on the GP500 aren't as good as what I'm seeing here on the 4550. So I'm happy to recommend this. I'll leave a link to this in the description if you're interested. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. Anyway, that's it. Take care. Bye-bye.